Have you ever wondered if a thawing Arctic could quietly tip the balance of global power? Not with oil, but with shipping lanes that change the rules of the game for companies like Tesla and even entire countries? Because right now, as polar ice melts faster than scientists predicted just a decade ago, nations and corporations are racing to access a shortcut above the world, a route that could redraw the map for how and where our most essential products are made. What we're about to investigate goes far beyond the old narratives of climate change and rising sea levels. Instead, this is a story about the invisible arteries of our global economy and how once impassable stretches of the Arctic have suddenly become open for business, slashing the distance and time it takes to move critical raw materials from Asia to Europe. The Northern Sea Route, for example, can cut voyages by nearly half compared to the Suez Canal. This means ships skip clogged, vulnerable hotspots like the Red Sea, the Suez, or even the Panama Canal. For big players in electric vehicles, batteries, electronics, companies like Tesla, this new route could decide who wins and who fades in tomorrow's industrial landscape. Now, to put this in perspective, earlier this year, Tesla's Gigafactory in Berlin ground to a halt. Not because of labor strife or dwindling demand, but because attacks in the Red Sea blocked conventional shipping from Asia. Suddenly, a journey that should have taken 2 weeks became a month-long ordeal, costing millions and risking thousands of jobs. If that sounds dramatic, remember, the world's supply chains have always depended on routes that are more geopolitical chessboard than open highway, and a small disruption can ripple out into lost hours, lost sales, and even lost market share on a global scale. But the Arctic shortcut, running along Russia's northern coast or threading Canada's fabled Northwest Passage, offers more than just a faster path. It represents both an opportunity and a threat. For the first time in history, manufacturers from China or Korea can reach Europe while bypassing maritime choke points controlled by rivals or threatened by conflict. Russia, which now dominates these emerging northern lanes with its powerful icebreaker fleet, stands poised to charge tolls, dictate terms, and influence the rhythm of world trade. For American companies and the country's own strategic interests, this is far from a distant concern. Consider the numbers. Global shipping via the Northern Sea Route more than doubled in the past 5 years.
China, the world's largest exporter, from electronics to lithium-ion batteries, has been pouring billions into Polar Silk Road investments, ice-class vessels, Arctic research hubs, and new alliances with Russia. For reference, the shipping distance from South Korea's major ports to Rotterdam can be reduced by nearly 40% using the emerging Arctic passages. That means finished cars, crucial battery components, semiconductors could land in Europe days or even weeks ahead of versions sent by traditional southern routes. This speed and the potential cost savings, sometimes estimated at up to 30% per journey, matters enormously for companies locked in a race where time, reliability, and price make the difference between scaling up and scaling out. While Tesla scrambles to diversify its appliances and build ever more gigafactories closer to its end markets, the reality is that its supply chains for batteries, rare earths, and components remain deeply tangled in Asian manufacturing hubs, especially in China. That dependency was thrown into sharp relief not just by the Red Sea attacks, but also by ongoing bottlenecks in the Panama Canal, where drought has forced ships to queue for days or pay premium fees. These shots expose how vulnerable even the most advanced, vertically integrated manufacturers are to disruptions they don't control. And in this volatile mix, the Arctic's opening could change who holds the cards. But let's be clear, this shortcut is not a magic bullet. The Arctic remains perilous and unpredictable. Navigation is still largely limited to the warmer months, from July to October. Ice flows can damage even the most advanced vessels, and port infrastructure is rudimentary compared to major hubs like Singapore or Rotterdam. Russia's control over the North Sea route means Western firms must weigh not only higher insurance and expertise, but also political risk, especially as sanctions and geopolitical chills deepen. In other words, what looks like a shortcut on a map is complicated and at times fraught in reality. Even so, the momentum is unmistakable. According to trade data, the volume of goods shipped by Uvenor Institute is expected to climb by more than 50% in 2025. European automakers, logistics giants, and Asian peg exporters drawing up plans to use Arctic passages to dodge spiraling costs and delays elsewhere. And as more companies test these routes and invest in Arctic shipping, the infrastructure, technology, and legal frameworks will only deepen, and it's increasingly clear that the Arctic's opening will not just shift geopolitical balances, but also reshape the international trading model.
For the United States, and for its biggest innovators, the imperative to adapt has never been more urgent. Why does this matter to Americans beyond shipping costs? Because our global competitiveness is increasingly linked to supply chain resilience. Faster, more secure shipping routes mean lower prices for consumers and less risk of factory closures or layoffs when things go wrong thousands of miles away. Conversely, falling behind means watching jobs and value-added industries shift to places that can deliver more reliably and cheaply, and ceding strategic leverage to rivals who dominate the new routes. But there are also environmental and ethical questions. Widespread shipping in the Arctic risks disturbing fragile ecosystems and accelerating climate change. A paradox, since climate change is what made these routes passable in the first place. International regulators are beginning to grapple with how to manage emissions, oil spill preparedness, and indigenous rights in regions previously untouched by large-scale industry. For companies like Tesla, whose brand is tied to green technology, the optics and consequences of capitalizing on environmentally sensitive shortcuts could prove double-edged. Added to this, American and European shippers must navigate a maze of new regulations, from Russian permits and icebreaker escort fees to stricter international environmental codes. The cost savings might look attractive, but every shortcut comes with new risks, and a miscalculation could mean not just lost cargo, but also lost reputation. So where does this leave Tesla, and by extension, the American innovation engine? The company has started rethinking its global logistics, seeking out new suppliers and breaking ground on factories closer to its key markets. Yet full localization is years away, and rivals in China and Europe are already experimenting with Arctic routes to get their products to market first and cheaper. If Tesla moves too slowly, it risks watching others take the lead, not through superior technology, but through smarter, swifter supply chain strategies. This raises an uncomfortable question. In a world where climate change creates strategic shortcuts, can American companies thrive while balancing economic advantage with ethical responsibility and geopolitical reality? And is the U.S.
government, along with its industry leaders, paying enough attention to a part of the map that until recently was dismissed as nothing more than endless, frozen waste? As the race to control the Arctic accelerates, so does the competition over resources, over rules, and over the future of jobs and technology. Every decision counts, from where we build our factories to how we navigate the planet itself. What do you think? Does exploiting the Arctic's opening represent smart adaptation or a risky gamble with unpredictable consequences? Let us know in the comments. Is this new shipping frontier a sustainable path forward for American industry, or just another race that leads us further into uncharted territory?